My daughter unplugged my microphone mid-sentence. I was 3 words into a toast for my late wife, in a ballroom full of 200 people, when the speaker beside my wine glass went dead. The lights didn't change, the music didn't stop. Nothing dramatic. Just a small click on the soundboard at the back of the room, and then my voice, gone. My hand kept the smile frozen on my face. My knuckles went white around the stem of my glass. A laugh rippled across the nearest table. Polite, confused. My daughter Eloise looked down at her plate. My son-in-law Vincent Crail lifted his glass toward me from across the room with a small, perfect smile, the kind you give someone when you have just taught them a lesson. Then the caterer took my arm. Marielle. She had silver hair tucked behind one ear, an apron still tied at her waist, and the look of a woman who had seen something she was not supposed to see. She leaned close. She said 6 words I was never supposed to hear. Your daughter didn't write that speech. And by morning, Vincent Crail's perfect life was on fire. If you've ever been quietly erased from your own family, hit subscribe. We see you here. Now let me take you back to how I ended up holding a dead microphone in a room built for my own grandson's birthday, 6 weeks before my world caught light. It started 4 Thanksgivings ago. Margaret was still alive then. I remember because Margaret set the table that year the way she always did, the good cloth napkins folded into points, the cranberry sauce she'd been making since 1987, the candle in the window even though no one was coming from outside. Just family. Just the 4 of us. Me, Margaret, Eloise, and the man Eloise had just brought home to meet us. Vincent Crail, 34. Real estate. The kind of smile that makes a room relax before you've decided whether to trust him. He brought a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly pension. He pulled my chair out before I could reach it. He called Margaret ma'am 3 times in 15 minutes, in the voice of a man practicing kindness. And Margaret, who had seen every kind of man in 63 years of marriage, looked at me across the table and mouthed 2 words I will never forget. Be careful. I didn't understand her then. I do now. Vincent was already curating us. The wine, the chair, the sirs and ma'ams. He was building a photograph of a family he could use, and he wanted my daughter standing in the middle of it smiling. He was also doing the math. At the time I thought he was charming. In hindsight he was pricing us. 18 months later, Margaret was gone. Pancreatic. 8 weeks from diagnosis to the last breath. I held her hand in the hospice bed and she pressed the pocket watch into my palm. The one she had bought me for my 60th birthday. Gold. Heavy. The kind of watch a man winds once a day with his thumb and forefinger. Don't lose it, she said. Long as that watch ticks, you're not alone. I wound it every morning for 4 years. I still do. It sits on my dresser at 6:14 every morning, and the small click it makes when the ratchet catches is the loudest sound in the house. After Margaret died, Vincent's voice in our house changed. He stopped saying Dad. He started calling me Daniel, in the tone men use 40s for older men they're going to outlast. He started arriving 40 minutes late to dinners and then telling Eloise, while I cleared the plates, that we needed to talk about the dynamic. The dynamic. He used that word a lot. He used it the way a man uses it when he's about to be cruel but wants to sound like a therapist. You know I love Eloise, he said one night in my daughter's kitchen, in a voice so quiet I had to lean in. But your grief is a weight she carries now. We're trying to build something here. You understand? I understood. He was telling me my daughter's dead mother was a problem I was making worse by missing her. He went back to the living room. He poured himself more wine from the bottle he'd brought, the wine he'd already opened for himself. I stood at the sink and I looked at my hands. I thought about the wedding I'd attended 6 months earlier, where Vincent had stood at the altar in a custom Tom Ford and told my daughter, in front of God and 300 guests, that he would honor her family as his own. The same hands that wrote that vow were now quietly telling me my grief was an inconvenience he was going to manage. I stayed in my lane. I picked up Theo from daycare twice a week. Theo's named after Margaret's father. He's 3 now. When he was learning to talk, he called me Grandpa Dan, and I have never in my life been more proud of a single syllable. I taught him how the watch ticks. I held it up to his ear and let him listen. He laughed so hard his whole body folded. One morning, the year Theo turned 2, I asked Eloise if I could take him to the aquarium on Sunday. She hesitated. That was the first time she had ever hesitated about Theo and me. Let me ask Vincent. I don't know why my daughter had to ask her husband about a Sunday at the aquarium with her own father and her own son. But I waited. Vincent came down the stairs in a towel. He said, "Daniel, we appreciate it. We're just trying to keep our weekends structured right now. Maybe the following weekend. Maybe the following weekend." The next weekend there was a brunch. The weekend after that, there was a christening for one of Vincent's clients. The weekend after that, Vincent's sister was visiting. The weekend after that, Molly, the dog trainer Vincent had just hired for Theo's birthday party, was doing a home visit. The aquarium became an appointment I could not get on the calendar, no matter how many times I asked. That was the year I learned the new rule. I would be included in family only when Vincent's image required a father-in-law in the photograph. Otherwise, my presence was a weight Eloise had to manage. The first holiday he stole from me was Thanksgiving. 2 years ago. Eloise called the Tuesday before. "Dad, Vincent thinks we should do something smaller this year. Just us, our little family." Our little family did not include me. I drove across town that day with a sweet potato pie I'd baked that morning, the recipe Margaret's mother had taught her in 1962. I sat in the driveway for 20 minutes and then drove home with the pie on the passenger seat, untouched. I went inside. I ate a slice at the kitchen table by myself, with the candle in the window that Margaret had used to light every year. I called my neighbor, who is also a widower, and we watched a football game neither of us cared about. The pie was still warm on my plate when I cut the second slice. I never got the recipe out of my head. The second holiday was worse. Easter. Eloise came to my door with a basket she had clearly assembled without Vincent's input. Grass dyed slightly yellow from a hardware store. 3 plastic eggs. A chocolate bunny 2 sizes too small. She set it on the porch, hugged me with one arm because the door was between us, and said, "Dad, I love you. You know that, right?" And then she left. She didn't come inside. She didn't bring Theo. Vincent was waiting in the car, the engine running, his eyes on his phone. I stood on my porch with a chocolate bunny and watched her drive away. I put the bunny in the kitchen drawer behind the nutmeg. I didn't eat it. I couldn't make myself. 2 years later, the foil is still slightly wrinkled around the ears. The drawer sticks when I open it. I still open it. The third holiday was the worst. Last Christmas. I was uninvited from Theo's first birthday party. Eloise texted me at 11:14 p.m. the night before. "Dad, Vincent says the venue is at capacity. So sorry, we'll do something small after." I did not write back. I drove across town at 6 the next morning in my good coat, the one Margaret had bought me, the one with the lining she had reinforced at the seam herself because she hated a coat that fell apart. I stood across the street from the venue in the cold, and I watched through the window. I watched my grandson blow out his candle. I watched Eloise clap in a dress Vincent had picked out 2 weeks before. I watched Vincent pour the wine and pose for photographs with both hands on Theo's shoulders. The photographer's flash went off 19 times. I drove home in the snow. I put the coat away. I did not hang it in the closet. I set it on the chair in the bedroom, the way a man sets a coat down when he doesn't know if he will need it again. When I got there, I found an envelope on the floor inside my front door. It had been slipped under the door. No name, no return address. Inside was a printed invitation, mint condition, gold trimmed, addressed to me by name, to Eloise's intimate graduation gala. Black tie preferred. Intimate, 200 guests. Black tie preferred. Vincent's name at the bottom as host, not Eloise's. Addressed to me by name. So either I was supposed to be there, or someone in this house wanted me to know exactly how thoroughly I had been erased from inside it. I set the invitation on the kitchen table. I sat down. I poured myself a small glass of the wine Vincent had given me at our first Thanksgiving. I read the invitation 4 times. And that's when I noticed the second thing. The envelope had a handwritten note tucked behind the printed card. Just one line. He paid the DJ, the florist, and the caterer. You weren't supposed to see this. I did not recognize the handwriting. I still do not. I have never discovered who slipped that envelope under my door. But whoever it was, they knew what Vincent was doing. They wanted me to know too. They wanted me to follow the money. I thought about calling Eloise. I thought about confronting Vincent. I thought about standing on his lawn in front of his neighbors and shouting. For about 45 seconds, I did. Then Margaret's voice came back to me, the way it does when I am about to do something stupid. I sat back down. I started making a list. I made a phone call to a man I had not talked to in 11 years. Henry Park. My old friend from the law firm before I retired. A quiet man. The kind of quiet that listens more than it speaks. I told him about the invitation. I told him about the envelope. I told him about the venue Vincent had booked, a place on Harbor Lane called the Maison Belle Rose. Henry went quiet. Then he said, "Daniel, do you know who owns the parent company of the Maison Belle Rose?" I did not. "You do, my friend. Your late wife's pension plan has been quietly invested in them for years. You hold the controlling interest. You have for 9 years." I sat down at my kitchen table. I picked up the pocket watch. I held it to my ear. Margaret had done this for me, before she died. The way she used to do things, quietly, with a chain of small decisions she never told anyone about. She had set up the pension that way because she had read the same article I had read, on the same Sunday, about how a controlling interest could be held quietly by ordinary people. She had built me a lifeboat I didn't know I had. I did not call Vincent. I did not call Eloise. I waited. The Saturday after the uninvited birthday, I drove to the Maison Belle Rose. I did not go inside. I parked across the street and I looked at the building. A man named Marcus runs the front desk. I texted Henry. Henry called Marcus. Within 90 minutes I had a folder, a copy of the original booking contract for the venue, a copy of the catering invoice, a copy of the floral invoice, a copy of the photography invoice, and 3 emails from Vincent's assistant adjusting the guest list upward by name. By name. I went home. I wrote down the names. I sat at the table and I drew lines between them. Vincent's 3 largest clients. Vincent's poker club. Vincent's mentor. Vincent's sister and her husband. Vincent's college roommate. Vincent's college roommate's wife. Vincent's college roommate's wife's sister. I sat back in the chair. I looked at the page. They were all coming to my grandchild's party in my venue, paid for by my son-in-law, none of them knowing that the man Vincent was performing for was also the man whose building they were standing inside. I sent one email to the venue manager. Just one line. "I will be attending. My presence is not negotiable. Please confirm a microphone at table 9. The reply came back in 4 minutes. "Confirmed, Mr. Asher." I did not send Eloise an RSVP. I did not tell Vincent I was coming. I had to wait. I had to sit on this for weeks. And every week, Vincent sent me a small reminder that he was still running the show. The week before the party, Eloise invited me to dinner. Just the 3 of us. Theo with the sitter. Vincent wore a shirt with no tie and smiled like a man who had already won. "Dad," Eloise said at the table, "we wanted you to know that Vincent and I have written a little toast for the party. We're going to say a few words about fatherly love, and I was hoping you would respond. Just a small thank you to the family. Just a small thank you to the family." The family Vincent had curated. The family Eloise was no longer allowed to disagree with. Vincent leaned back in his chair. "Daniel, we want this to be beautiful. Eloise will say a few words. Then a small moment where we recognize you. For everything you've given. I think it'll mean a lot." He paused. He looked at his wine. "We'll be sure," he said, "that you get a moment. We're not leaving you out this time." He said it the way a man says it when he is paving over a grave he dug himself. I looked at my daughter. I said, "That sounds lovely, sweetheart. I'll be there." He smiled. I smiled. We ate dinner like men burying a hatchet. The drive home, I stopped at the venue. I walked in with Marcus. I tested the microphone at table 9 myself. The sound was clean. I walked to the podium. The lights fit my height. I stood behind it for a moment and I thought about my wife. Then I went home. Now I want you to understand the room. The Maison Belle-Rose ballroom is built for cameras. Chandeliers the size of small cars. 200 chairs arranged around 12 tables, each centerpiece a small glass tree wrapped in fairy lights. A stage at the front with a podium. A microphone. The wine was a 2016 Bordeaux Vincent had ordered 4 cases of. The waitstaff was in white gloves. The photographer Vincent had hired was the same one the mayor of our city uses for charity galas. I arrived in good time. I wore my best suit. The watch was in my breast pocket. I shook hands with Vincent's clients, the ones I had met at previous fundraisers, the ones Eloise had stopped inviting me to. They called me Mr. Asher. They shook my hand. They did not know what Vincent had done to me. None of them did. Vincent worked too hard at the small talk. Eloise greeted me with a kiss. She looked tired. She looked like a woman who had not written the speech she was about to give. Marielle appeared at my elbow, smiled, asked if my wine was acceptable. I said it was. She moved on. Dinner came. Speeches came. Vincent stood up at the podium first. He talked for 6 minutes about family values, community, his late father-in-law's wisdom, meaning me, meaning the man he had quietly tried to erase for 4 years. He mentioned my name 3 times. He mentioned Margaret's name once. He used the word dynamic again. He said the family were building 4 times. He sat down. Then Eloise was supposed to stand. Instead, Eloise looked at Vincent across the table. He nodded. She stood. She walked to the podium. She opened a small leather folder with notes in it. She spoke with the voice of a woman reading lines she had memorized. "Dad," she said into the microphone, "Vincent and I just want to say thank you for everything you've done for our little family." She paused. She looked at the cue card Vincent had slid toward her 2 minutes before. "And we especially want to thank you," she continued, "for being so gracious about the space we've needed to build." The room clapped lightly. Polite? Half the people did not know who she was talking about. The other half knew, because Vincent had told them. She paused. She looked at her notes. "We've asked Vincent to step up tonight," she said, "and to honor you with a small surprise." I saw it before she finished. Vincent rose. He buttoned his coat. He crossed the room. He placed his hand on the back of my chair. He smiled for the cameras. "No microphone tonight, Daniel," he said, low enough that only I could hear. "Not for this part, but we'll give you the floor in a few minutes." He squeezed my shoulder. He walked to the podium, and in that moment, the click came on the soundboard at the back of the room. My microphone went dead, just like that. Mid-sentence, mid-toast, in front of 200 people, in my own venue, with the watch ticking in my pocket. Vincent had not even given me a sentence to finish. He had unplugged me before I spoke. My hand held the smile. My knuckles went white around the wine glass. I didn't know yet what Marielle knew. I didn't know yet what Vincent had actually paid for. I only knew that my daughter had just read a script at her father's table, in her father's room, in her father's city, and the man who had written the script had bought the silence he needed to make it look natural. He turned back to the podium and gave his speech about me. He said I'd been a quiet presence. He said the family was grateful. He thanked me for my patience. He never mentioned Margaret. He never mentioned Theo's birthday he had locked me out of. He never mentioned the 3 holidays he had erased. Marielle found me at the bar 10 minutes later. She set down a glass of water I had not asked for. She looked at me the way staff look when they have to say something that will cost them their tip. "Your daughter didn't write that speech." 6 words. I heard them land. "I packed the cue cards," Marielle said. "He paid me an extra $3,000 to slip a copy of the script into her folder this morning and to make sure the mic cut when you stood. I'm sorry. I have children. I needed the money. But you should know what he did tonight." That wasn't all, she said. He also paid the DJ to extend his set whenever he gestured. He paid the florist to put his monogram on the runner. He paid the photographer to shoot him more than anyone else. He paid Marcus to seat you where the light was worst. Every bill tonight has an extra line item for him. Her hands were shaking. I gave her my business card. I told her to keep her tip. I told her to keep her job. I told her she had just given me the one thing Vincent Crail could not buy back. The truth. I thanked her and I walked back into the ballroom. Vincent was at the center of a small group, his hand on someone's shoulder. Eloise was talking to the photographer, who was telling her to smile a little wider. Theo was asleep in a hotel suite upstairs with the sitter. I stood at the podium. The mic worked now because Marielle had flipped the switch back. Vincent saw me standing. He came over. "Daniel, what are you?" "I would like to say a few words," I said. The room quieted. 200 people. Half of them were Vincent's. Half of them were witnesses. I held my wine glass in one hand. I held my phone in the other. "I want to begin," I said, "by reading the toast Eloise was supposed to give. The one written in the leather folder." I read the first line. Vincent's hand tightened around his glass. I read the second line. Vincent stepped toward the soundboard. I read the third. "Vincent, please sit down. I'm not finished." He sat. The room stayed very quiet. I want to ask my daughter a question. "Eloise, sweetheart, look at me. Did you write the speech Vincent placed in your folder this evening? Did you write the line thanking Vincent for letting your father speak? Did you write the line about the space we needed to build?" Eloise's voice was small. "He wrote it. He said it would be beautiful." "Thank you, sweetheart. That's all I needed." I set the folder down. I held up my phone. I had spent 3 weeks, with Henry Park's help, putting together a stack of documents. A partnership filing in Delaware for a supposed community foundation honoring my name, except I had never consented. A circular of signatures from Vincent's poker buddies listed as the community. A text thread between Vincent and a man named Sal Ferraro about how to handle my consent. A printed schedule from Vincent's assistant showing which weekends my access to Theo had been quietly thinned. The full catering invoice with Marielle's line item in red. The monogrammed runner. The DJ extension trigger. The mic cut cue. I read the names aloud. I read the amounts. I read the date Vincent had stopped inviting me to Theo's school pickup. I read the date Vincent had told Eloise to use the word dynamic. I read the date Eloise had been handed a script for the first time. I told the room about the aquarium. I told the room about the chocolate bunny in the drawer. I told the room about the chair by the bedroom door where the good coat sat because I didn't know yet if I would need it again. I told the room that I had driven across town on a Christmas morning in the snow to watch my grandson's first birthday through a window, in a coat that was warmer than I deserved. I told the room that my wife of 41 years had been quietly replaced, in her own family's vocabulary, with the word dynamic. The room did not move. Vincent's face was unreadable. His clients were looking at their hands. "I would like to ask," I said, "whether anybody here tonight was told the guest list had been tripled for tonight." Eloise's original list was 64 people. 3 weeks ago, Vincent added 136 names. Every one of them is in this room. Every one of them is being filmed tonight. Vincent quadrupled his audience by quadrupling the list. The waitstaff had stopped moving. Marielle stood at the back door with her arms folded. "Vincent," I said, "you told Eloise the venue was at capacity last Christmas. This is my venue. This is Margaret's venue. The deed on file is mine. The controlling interest on file is mine. And you filled it tonight with people you wanted to see you shine." Vincent opened his mouth. I kept going. "You paid the caterer to plug my microphone mid-toast. You wrote your wife's speech and put it in her mouth. You have spent 4 years performing a family in front of cameras and erasing the father of the family whenever the cameras weren't rolling. You have spent 4 years teaching my daughter the word dynamic so she could name the wound you gave her." I held up the pocket watch. I held it where the lights caught the gold. "My late wife bought me this watch on my 60th birthday. She said, 'Long as this watch ticks, you're not alone.' Vincent, you have spent 4 years trying to make me feel alone. You wrote the wrong ending." I set the phone down. I looked at Eloise. She was crying. She was looking at Vincent the way a woman looks at a man when she first understands what he has done. I would like to go home with my daughter and my grandson tonight, I said. Vincent, the tip for the staff tonight is on me. The venue fee is on me. The photographer's invoice is on me. And Marcus at the front desk has my number. I walked to Eloise. I held out my arm. She took it. We left. The hallway outside the ballroom was empty. Eloise's heels clicked against the marble. I held her elbow. We took the elevator upstairs to the suite. I picked up Theo in his pajamas. He held the stuffed bear. Let's go home, buddy. The snow had stopped. We drove home in silence. Theodore fell asleep in his car seat by the time we pulled into the driveway. 3 days later, Vincent's 3 largest clients quietly canceled. The community foundation Vincent had launched collapsed when the local paper ran the documents on the front of the Sunday business section. Sal Ferraro was investigated by the state. Vincent lost his license to practice real estate for 90 days pending review. The state bar opened a file. The ethics committee at his old brokerage sent him a letter. Eloise moved back in with me the following Monday. Theo brought 2 suitcases and a stuffed bear Margaret had once given Eloise on her 3rd birthday. I put the bear back in the nursery. I wound the watch. Theo sat on my lap and tried to wind it himself. Grandpa Dan, he said, I wind it now. You wind it, buddy. That's good. That's the right way to wind it. The weeks after that were quiet. Vincent called twice. I did not answer. He left a voicemail on the 2nd call. Eloise deleted it without playing it for me. I respected that. Eloise spoke to him once on a Tuesday in the car while I sat in the kitchen with Theo and let her go. When she came back in, she sat at the table and she cried for about 6 minutes. I held her hand. I didn't say anything. I let her finish. He said I ruined him, she said at last. He said I ruined his life. He ruined his life, sweetheart, I said. You just stopped covering for it. She started therapy in October. Theo started preschool. I started teaching him the names of the birds in our yard, the way I had wanted to teach him 3 years ago, when Vincent had given me the runaround about weekends. We put up a small bird feeder at the kitchen window. The first morning we had 4 goldfinches. Theo named them all Mary. I cook dinner most nights now. Something simple. Roast chicken on Sundays. Margaret's sweet potato pie on Thanksgiving. Nobody performs us anymore. Nobody curates us. The watch ticks on the dresser. I don't hear it the way I used to. I hear it like a clock that's supposed to be there. I hear it like my wife is still in the next room. Eloise redecorated the guest room in November. We agreed on cream walls. We disagreed on the curtains. She won. She usually wins on curtains and loses on bird feeders. We are learning a new balance, the one Margaret would have wanted for us. The summer after the party, on Margaret's birthday, I took Theo to the aquarium, the one Vincent had told me we would do another weekend. We stood in front of the blue tank for 45 minutes, and Theo kept pointing at the same fish. I bought him a stuffed version in the gift shop. He named it Vincent Jr., then corrected himself immediately. No, Grandpa Dan, fish Vincent. I laughed so hard my side hurt. Margaret would have laughed harder. She would have laughed so hard she would have cried, and then she would have asked me to write it down so we could tell Eloise at Thanksgiving. Family, I have learned in the years since Margaret died, is not the room you perform in. Family is the kitchen where the pie burns a little on the edge and nobody minds. Family is the man who answers the door when you come home. Family is the boy who learns to wind a watch because his grandfather taught him how. When the party was over and the room was empty and the chairs were stacked and the lights were off, I stood in the ballroom alone for a moment. The chandeliers were dimmed but still on. The podium was still up. The microphone was still hot from 2 hours of speeches. I walked to the center of the floor. I looked up at the stage where Vincent had stood when he stepped on me. The runner with his monogram was still in the center of the aisle. Marielle came back in. She untied her apron. Mr. Asher, she said, I want you to know. The runner was his idea. Margaret's name was never on it the way you told the room. I know, I said. Thank you for telling me that. I paid her tip in cash. I tipped her double. Then I walked to the table where my wine glass was still sitting, with the lipstick print. The one Vincent had raised at me when he cut my mic. I wrapped it in the linen napkin and I put it in my pocket. I'll keep it. I don't know what for, but I'll keep it. I opened the small door at the side of the stage. I stepped out onto the floor. I found my watch in front of me. It was still ticking in my breast pocket. I took it out. I held it up to my ear, the way I always do. The way I taught Theo to do. Tick, tick, tick. Not alone anymore, Margaret. Not alone anymore.